Hello and welcome to Exploring London, the little known series where we begrudgingly explore bits of London. And if London was a theme park, then I think Greenwich would be SeaWorld. No, not Sea, Shipville. Maritime Land. No. Okay, let's start again. Hello and welcome to Exploring London, the little known series where we begrudgingly explore bits of... Yes, what is it? I heard you're into Roman roads. Yeah. You ever heard of Watling Street? No. Used to run from Dover through Greenwich all the way to Shropshire. Up there. But, handsome stranger, how do you know all this? So this is where he pointed to, the gates of Greenwich Park. No. Yes. If, as I often find, you one day run out of anything else to do, have a look at the incredibly straight road cutting across Kent, which abruptly stops next to Greenwich Park. Except obviously it didn't stop there. It ran straight through Greenwich Park and came out where the main exit gates are now. And try not to scream, but I'm standing on the remains of it right now. This is something you can still see, still imagine. It hasn't disappeared like Lindsay Lohan or talk of a smooth Brexit. This is real, extant history. Further along, you can spot the disturbance in the ground where a Roman temple used to be, just next to this road. You might also spot the dog excrement. Greenwich Park, in fact all of Greenwich, is just packed full of history. It was a playground for kings and queens, a vital centre for all things maritime, and it was even a place of interest for some of the earlier inhabitants of this noisy isle. Take this bit behind me. You know, in the bleak midwinter it's a bit hard to imagine, but in summer children frolic, dogs play, lovers picnic all over this field, blissfully unaware that these nice round undulations are in fact barrows, and that this is a Bronze Age graveyard. It's almost enough to put you off your sausage rolls, but not quite. Given this history, it's unsurprising that Greenwich has caught the attention of pagans and Wiccans and other mystical people who leave candles and offerings inside this stone fountain. They call it the Mother Stone Fountain, and, you know, whilst I don't like to ruin anyone's fun, particularly when it involves people who could potentially possess magic, I did a bit of digging and I couldn't really find why this is such a significant place. You know, it was built in the Victorian era, it's made of granite, the piping is lead.
Don't drink this, kids.
And that's literally the whole story.
Or is it?
Yes?
Can you be sure?
Why is it that fountains will be my friend, but not real people? Anyway, there's a temptation here to start talking about the Royal Observatory, which sits atop a hill in Greenwich Park on the site of Greenwich Castle, reportedly the place Henry VIII liked to store his mistresses. As the old saying goes, keep your friends close, keep your mistresses in a castle. There's a temptation to talk about the daily event that attracts crowds numbering in the tens, where the great red time ball of death, or maybe it's not called that, drops to signal to mariners watching from the river that it is 1 o'clock, such that they may set their watches to aid navigation. I mean, just look at it. The majesty of time, laid bare in its beauty, before your very eyes. And there's the temptation to talk about the important astronomical discoveries and inventions made in this historic landmark. But that's not really what we're about here, and to be honest, your overarching memory of the observatory will be the crowds of tourists desperately trying to get a photo on the Prime Meridian line, not realising that the line is 20,000 kilometres long. Look, the line keeps going outside the observatory. Oh my god, it's the Prime Meridian. Look, Mum, I'm in 2 hemispheres. Hashtag East meets West. Yeah? No, we're about the places the open bus tour won't tell you about. That's why I brought you here, because you guys know I like to keep things pretty light on this channel, and so I brought you to the place of Britain's first ever experience of international terrorism. See, it was here that a Frenchman espousing the ideals of anarchy exploded a bomb he was carrying and damaging part of the observatory in 1894. And setting a precedent that would continue for hundreds of years, his terrorism didn't cause all that much anarchy. This is the Queen's House. It was built as an adjunct to the larger and now defunct Palace of Placentia, which housed the Kings Henry, Elizabeth I, etc. Apparently architects get very excited about it, and in fact, I have one with me right now. Connor, what is it about the Queen's House that's so significant?
Well, Andrew, this is the first true example of classical architecture in Britain, and you can see that.
Okay, architects get very excited about it, but not us. The Royal Hospital for Seamen at Greenwich, seamen, replaced the Palace of Placentia in 1692. Now, it wasn't a hospital in the sense that you and I would use, but it literally provided hospitality, a place to stay for wounded soldiers returning from naval battles. They wouldn't do anything to fix your crippling injuries, but they would let you stay in a very pretty campus whilst you suffered from them. Queen Mary took one Hang on. What happened to Conor the architect? I thought that was going to be a new character. Is that all we're going to hear from him? Yes. Queen Mary took one look at the plans for this new hospital and immediately lodged an objection with her local council's planning office that her beautiful river view from the Queen's House would be destroyed, knowing that losing that would knock 20, maybe 30% off the asking price were she ever to sell. Christopher Wren, who basically built everything, designed the hospital to split in two, creating the grand arcade we see today. At the western edge of the hospital, a market had sprung up, selling fruit and veg, meat, flowers, fridge magnets, all manner of things, and it rather got in the way of things. So the crafty governors of Greenwich Hospital had a market built next door. They then had an Act of Parliament passed that said they were the only people allowed to run a market in Greenwich. So finally, they could charge everyone anything they liked to use a market that was no longer in their way. Personally, I'm surprised that sign doesn't read Greenwich Monopoly. Oh, we can't use that. But after all that, the hospital is actually gone. The Navy took it over and the buildings became the Royal Naval College for 100 or so years. But now they've buggered off too, and now it's used by various educational organisations as well as the occasional film shoot. Turns out they're shooting a film here today, and I got all excited. I was like, oh, maybe a new James Bond film or a Harry Potter. But it turns out it's a Fast and Furious spin-off. I've come to the hulking Greenwich Power Station, which sits uncomfortably close to the comparatively lovely Trinity Almshouse, a bit like Harvey Weinstein sitting shoulder to shoulder with Mary Berry. And the reason I'm showing you pictures of those instead of, actually being there is because they're doing construction work on the Thames Path for the next 37 weeks. The Almshouse, which we're not at, was built in 1613 and was charitable housing for the poor. Today, it is supported accommodation for people in difficult financial circumstances. So, incredibly, it's been doing the same thing for 400 years. Then at some point, the next door neighbours from hell moved in, Greenwich Power Station, built to power the city's trams, which since then seem to have been misplaced. It runs on oil now, but you can still see where the coal would have been picked up from barges on the Thames. Today it sometimes powers the London Underground, and presumably when it's not doing that, it just sits there feeling ashamed that it's not as iconic as the Battersea Power Station. And then there's the Cutty Sark. There's nothing interesting about the Cutty Sark. This is Greenwich Railway Station, built as part of the London and Greenwich Railway, which you might remember as being the oldest railway line in London from the tragically underappreciated Exploring Spa Road video. This is the only railway station in Greenwich, and so... Actually, Andrew, there's also Maze Hill Station, which is also in Greenwich, so 2 stations. Oh, okay. But then they also have... on reclaimed marshland, there's North Greenwich Underground Station, where the O2 is, so I guess that's 3 stations. Fine, yeah. Hey guys, does Deptford count? No. But according to this suspiciously old map I just found, it looks like there's another station just down the road. Greenwich Park Station was built by the London, Chatham and Dover Railway as an attempt to cream off some of that juicy railway dollar. So this should be Greenwich Park Station here, but where is it? It's closed, son. Closed many a year. 1917. Platforms buried. Station demolished. Shockingly, Greenwich residents didn't really take to the idea of using this rival train station, which took longer to get to and from London by, and so the whole thing ended up being a bit pointless. But let's finish up with a story. I want to tell you about my mate Alphege. Alphege? One of those. Former Archbishop of Canterbury and current saint. He was captured by Danish raiders, which I think is the politically correct 21st century term we have now for Vikings. He was held for ransom and brought here to what was presumably the local centre for raping and pillaging in Greenwich. But our friend Alphege refused to be ransomed, so the story goes, which conveniently omits the idea that the captured person doesn't usually choose whether the ransom is paid or not. But either way, he was pelted to death with ox bones and died of probably a traumatic brain injury or massive internal bleeding of some sort. And this church was erected on the site of his grisly death. And to think people get married here. And that's it. I feel like I barely scratched the surface of Greenwich, to be honest, but there's only so long I'm willing to spend out in the rain being stared at by tourists. The algorithm demands of me now that I ask you to like and subscribe, as if you'd ever be influenced by such a weak request. In the comments below, put the usual things I got wrong or places you'd like me to go next time. And of course, you could share the video with your most loved person. After all, knowledge is the greatest gift we can give. We'll stop there.